Hey everybody, welcome to the Herd Fit Podcast with Dr. Sam Rhee and myself, Coach David Syvertsen. This podcast is aimed at helping anyone and everyone looking to enhance their healthy lifestyle through fitness, nutrition, and most importantly, mindset.
All right, welcome back to the Herd Fit Podcast. I am Coach David Syvertsen with my co-host Sam Rhee, and we are having the honor to have Coach Chris Hinshaw on our podcast today. Chris, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. This, for those that don't know Chris Hinshaw, that means you live under a rock. He is, I'll speak for him and try to make him a little uncomfortable here, but he really is. If you ask to create a Mount Rushmore of CrossFit coaches, he's going to be on it. He's the founder of aerobiccapacity.com, widely considered the top endurance coach in the world within the CrossFit space. Currently resides in Cookeville, Tennessee. And I'm actually going to be taking his aerobic capacity course tomorrow. So that's why we kind of crossed paths here. We're in Morristown, New Jersey right now. I'll be at the aerobic capacity course tomorrow. He's a frequent commentator, many CrossFit events, including Wodapalooza, the CrossFit Games. He's a coach to 32 CrossFit Games Champions, 32, all right, big repeats. Coach to 50 plus CrossFit Games podium athletes, a 10 times Ironman competitor. All right, and has 12 plus years of CrossFit experience. Just want to give you guys a quick just background on who he's worked with. Who's who of CrossFit competitors? We have Mat Fraser, Rich Froning, Jason Khalipa, Camille Leblanc-Bazinet, Katrín Davíðsdóttir, Clair Toomey, Kristin Holte, Webb, Sara Sigmundsdóttir, Julie Foucher, several more. So basically, if you follow any CrossFitters on Instagram, Chris Hinshaw has probably coached them at some point. Chris, thanks for joining us today.
All rattled now.
So, we really want to get into a lot of what Chris has done as a coach and how he impacts us as athletes, us as coaches. But I really want to just kind of give you the opportunity to just talk about the aerobic capacity seminar and what you really are, what's the purpose of the seminar, and what you try to instill both athletes and coaches.
I'm still stuck on that whole list. What's funny is like I sit and I think about it. A lot of work went into what you just said.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, one of the things that people say to me periodically is, are you surprised at how fast things happen? It's like, oh yeah, that 25 years. And yeah, there's no gifts. I mean, it's a lot of hard work in there. And it's interesting that when you look back and you look at your work, what you've created, but there was a lot of effort that went into it, a ton.
Yeah.
And that's what's happened with the course. That course, what's interesting about the seminar is it was Matt Chan who got second in the CrossFit Games in 2012.
Okay.
I was having dinner with him in Santa Cruz, California, and I had done some workouts with him, and he took up an interest. This was in 2014, April-ish. And he said, at dinner, he said, I'd really like to understand how it is that you do what you do. And so I started sharing with him these thoughts, and he was scribbling down some ideas, and he had 6 napkins going. And at the end of dinner, he flips these around. He says, this is your content. These are your lectures, and you need to share this with the community. And I'm like, I'm not ready. There's no way. And he's like, I'm telling you, when you do decide to share, you got to share everything.
Right.
Don't hold back. I know you're developing what you think is intellectual property, but you got to show the community that you're confident in developing the next generation concept. So give him what you've learned. Share your data. Prove it that it works. And I'm like, I'm not, no way. Well, that was on Saturday.
Yeah.
On a Tuesday, I got a phone call from him and said, I just want you to know that I have booked you on Saturday from 9 o'clock until 5 o'clock, a full day seminar at my gym, CrossFit Verb in Denver.
Oh, wow.
This Saturday.
Let's prepare.
And I'm like, there's no way, you got to cancel. He's like, I can't. We've already got 4 signups. And that's how it actually started. And then, it's interesting to me when I think from that, we had an hour break for lunch, and I got on the rental car and I went around the block and I fell asleep for 55 minutes. I was so crushed in getting in front of people.
Wow.
It's hard because when you're by yourself, when you stop talking, there's no one bailing you out, right?
Yeah,
And that's tough.
Or hide.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was the start of it. And we've done, I don't know, maybe 4,000 people have run 5,000 through our course.
Wow.
I've taught them all so far.
Okay.
We're grooming people to take them on.
Okay.
Where then I can go into more advanced educational concepts, like a level 2 version.
Awesome. So yeah, so here we are 8 years later. It's funny, April 2014 is when we had that conversation. 2 months prior is when our gym opened at CrossFit Games New Jersey. So, just like put that frame, and we're in the middle of a podcast series right now going over the history of our gym, how it all started, and so much happens in those 8 years. And here we are.
Yep.
I have people from my gym that signed up for tomorrow's seminar and are on the wait list. So you go from 4 people have to go because there's 4 people to, a seminar that is sold out. So, you also have an extremely accomplished background as an Ironman, All-American swimmer, international finishes, second place at the overall finish Hawaiian Ironman World Championship, second place overall finish Ironman World Championship in Canada, and then the first place overall finish Ironman Brazil. You are coach now. How do you blend your experience as an athlete into your coach? Okay, because you're also coaching a different sport, right, than the Ironman. How can you blend your experiences as an athlete to who you coach?
Early on, triathlons being 3 sports, I thought that there was a lot of similarities into the CrossFit space, that you're not a specialist when you're a triathlete because you're doing 3 different things.
Right.
And that's the same holds true. There's nobody in CrossFit that's, that truly is committed to this concept of functional fitness that specializes in one activity.
Right.
But that's part of it that wasn't the case, is that you were a specialist in those 3 events. I mean, I was swimming 25,000 meters a week. I was riding 300 to 400 miles a week, and I'm running 40 to 50 for 8 years.
Wow.
I was a specialist.
Yeah.
And, you look at CrossFit Games athletes, if they're swimming a mile, 1,600, meters in a pool 1 time per week, that's a lot.
A lot, yeah.
Right. And if you are doing a 10-mile run as a CrossFit Games athlete, that was a lot. 10 miles was nothing. I mean, I would do 20 miles on a Saturday after doing the race because you have to hit your numbers.
Right.
And so part of it is that I learned a lot from those days. And it gave me some perspective in writing the workouts.
Okay.
To me, I feel that it's very challenging if you are a coach and you haven't been an athlete, or you're not an athlete, you don't have the perspective. Yeah. And what happens and what you see is the way in which workouts are written. And I'll give you an example. So one of the worst workouts that I gave Fraser one time was 9 rounds of 300 meters in roughly 54 seconds. And then he had to do a 100-meter walk.
So 100 meter run, 100 meter walk. Okay.
Yep. So 54 seconds, first 300,
okay,
and then a 100-meter walk. And he texted me afterwards, and the thing was a disaster. That was a disaster. And I'm like, of course, so part of it is, as a fan of the sport, I have to have my better half, Heidi, read my messages going back, because I don't want to look like a knucklehead when I'm responding. Go back, Fraser, as a fan.
Yeah, right.
But inside, I'm like, that's impossible, because I go off of numbers, and I'm a math guy, and although I don't control all of his variables, I'm writing workouts that he thinks are impossible, but I believe are possible.
Okay.
Because that's how you create confidence.
Right.
If you can get an athlete to do something seemingly impossible, then that's where they create their greatness process. Right. That's how to do it. And it's a very difficult thing. You must challenge all of the qualities in a workout so that athlete feels that pressure. Got it. And one of the things that I just said to you is the recovery in that workout was the 100-meter walk.
Correct.
But what did I do in that? I prescribed a time, didn't I?
Yeah.
Coaches that don't know will just say do a 100-meter walk. And I've seen people walk 100 meters in 10 minutes.
Right.
Right? And so when Fraser, when he finally starts communicating, because he let me stew on it all day, he said, what I realized is that I cannot walk 100 meters in 1 minute. I can't do it.
Okay.
My PR for a 100-meter walk is a 1:02.
Yes. So I'm not walking anymore.
Well, so I always told Dave Castro, it's like, if you really try to write workouts to get Mount to lose, do nothing but walking workouts and it'll lose.
So, I mean, it's touching on Fraser, but also some of the other champions you've worked with. And, I know you are a numbers guy. like I listened to it so much. I've listened to so
Well, I can show you what's.
Yeah, I know. This thing's probably worth $1 million right here, if not more, right? If I can sneak this out, maybe I'll give you my computer for yours. But the mindset of a champion, in my experience coaching and competing in the sport, there's so much that revolves around the mindset of going through the grind day to day, week to week, month to month, and the aura of online competing can get overwhelming sometimes as you're not live with so many people, and that's how the sport starts, and that's how you have to start success. What are some just traits of the champions you've worked with, and you've worked with so many? Is there a common ground to, when Mat Fraser says, I want to win on the assault bike, I don't want to get better at the assault bike. Where are you in that regard? Because you are such an objective coach. Do this in this many seconds. Do this in this many seconds. How sensitive or not sensitive do you be? Where do you find the black and white areas of like, hey, be objective here, be empathetic here, in regard to the mindset?
Wow, great question. So there's two things there. One is, are they coachable? And two is, are they willing to take risk?
Right. Okay.
So this whole concept of coachability, I think that it needs to be clearly defined, and because it's talked about a lot.
Coachability.
Right.
Yes.
Like, are you coachable? And we were talking earlier before this started about Jason Khalipa, and that was an athlete and I was so spoiled by having the chance to work with him because he was so highly coachable.
Right.
He said to me before we even started, this was in December of 2012, I want to know what you're doing. Okay. I want to understand it. Meaning he wants to understand the purpose, the reason behind it. Right. So I'm not wasting his time. Right. But he said to me, he says, I will never question you. I will do everything you ask of me. And
that's a coach's dream right there.
I made him run 20 miles 3 weeks before the 2013 CrossFit Games. Now, you have to think about back then. I had him do 10 by 800, Yasso's 800, which is a marathon predictor workout before the CrossFit Games. All right, and he held in those 800s 257. Garrett Fisher held 253s. Wow, which is incredible.
That is.
So for people that don't know Yasso's 800, it's 10 by 800 with a work to rest ratio of 1:1. So if you do it in 3 minutes, you get 3 minutes of rest.
Right.
So Jason went 257. The deal is that you take that 257, you convert it from minutes and seconds to hours and minutes, meaning 2 hours and 57. Okay. And then you could add another 5 minutes on there as a buffer, which means that Jay, if he had the stamina, he should be able to go somewhere around 257 to 302 for a marathon. What Jason did is took heat. He's ruining you. Mm-hmm. And he stood by me. He defended me. I had Garrett Fisher, Neil Maddox at that time, and they did exactly what I asked them to do. And it changed the sport forever.
Yeah.
That is a coachable athlete. That is so confident that they're willing to do whatever that coach, and they don't deviate. They stick with the plan. They want to understand the plan,
right?
But they stick with it,
right?
And that's what is coachable. Okay. But the other thing is that what I identified was, look at the risk he took. The risk. Mat Fraser, same thing. Mat Fraser and Rich Froning. I've told this story before that Rich Froning, there wasn't a question whether or not I would make him a better runner. That wasn't an issue. That would be easy. But what if I ruined him as a CrossFit athlete? He won the games 4 times when we started working together.
People would ask what happened.
Right.
Oh, this coach. Right. Pressure. Yeah.
And so I happened to end up meeting Mat Fraser. He came to the aerobic capacity course in this January of 2015 at CrossFit New England at Bergeron's gym.
Okay.
And lunchtime rolls around. He comes up to me and says, hey, come see questions. And he starts talking about his running workouts that he's been doing. And he wants to get a better understanding of these running workouts and how he's doing them, because he didn't understand the reasoning for them. He didn't understand like pacing. He didn't, because he came from a weightlifting background.
Right. And then right into CrossFit. So it's just go hard or go home kind of mentality.
But he was defining workouts with such precision. Like he had distances, and he had times for those distances. And then he had, like we talked about earlier, the recovery with set times for the recovery. The only person that's doing that even now is me. And how is a weightlifter doing this? And so I asked him that, and he's all, well, Rich Froning's programming my running workouts. I'm like, wait a minute. I think he's ripping me off type of a thing. And I was really like, I was bummed inside because Rich, he's as good as they come.
Right.
And I said, do you have an example? And he had 40 pages folded up in his back pocket, and he shows me. And sure enough, it was all Rich was doing was forwarding my emails to him. But he then says, oh, you're doing these. And he felt like embarrassed by it. And he then says, hey, so you just send them direct because Rich is sending me these things like 3 weeks, 4 weeks behind. And I said, well, let me ask you something. Are you concerned about this interference effect? Because in weightlifting, especially if you went to the Olympic Training Center,
Right.
the amount of propaganda telling weightlifters that if you do too much cardio, matter of fact, they usher them around in golf carts. They're not allowed to take the stairs. They got to take the elevator because of the potential conversion. And I said, are you concerned about the impact it's going to have on your strength based upon? He said, Chris, you know what? I never want to finish second ever again, ever. And I know if I don't fix this, I'll never win. Right. And if this drops me out of the top 10, drops me out of the sport, that's on me. But I need to do something to fix this in order to win.
Thinking outside the box.
That's risk.
Right. Yeah.
Doing something that others are not willing to do. And it shocks me that athletes are surprised they finish in the same spot.
Yeah. Now, as a coach, you said you don't charge when you're coaching CrossFit Games athletes because some of it is just experimenting or you're learning along with them. So when you did this with Khalipa, what was your thinking? Why you made him run 20 miles a couple of weeks before the games? And do you routinely say this is a good approach, or was it special just for him because of his capabilities and what he needed to do before the games? And do you customize those types of workouts specifically? Where you're like, if you're a games athlete, if you do this marathon simulation a couple of weeks before the games, that's a very good way of helping know where you are.
You have to, so with every athlete, you have to get what's behind what they're saying and really understand. And Jason, he lacked confidence. I mean, here's a guy that passed out in 2009 in the 7K run. Like, he would get dead last in every endurance event. And imagine that level of confidence that, the sport is evolving and it's turning into an endurance competition. I mean, let's face it, even if their events are short, you stack up 14 over 3 days, it's an endurance event.
Yep. How strong are you on the final day?
Right.
That's usually what it comes down to.
And so Jason knew he would never win.
Right.
That was in his head.
Yeah.
He was convinced of it. So as a coach, your job is to create confidence. The number one thing that you are creating is this level of confidence.
Right.
Imagine if Jason Khalipa is doing things that are seemingly impossible. I picked Yassa's 800 because it was recognized in the running community as a key indicator workout for a marathon, not a 5K, but a marathon.
Right.
And he dominated.
Yeah.
It was so intimidating what he did. Imagine how that turned around Jason's mindset.
Absolutely.
I didn't do it.
Yep.
And that's a trick. It's like, so my dad, he was an attorney. And as a kid, I would go, and I've never talked about this before. As a kid, I would go down and watch him in the courtroom. And he was one of the best, voted as like Harvard's law school, the best litigator in the U.S. Loved litigating.
Okay.
And he was a medical malpractice defense lawyer. And I would go in there and I would listen. And he had this skill of circling the wagons, meaning let's say he was cross-examining somebody, an economist, of saying that, this person, they lost out on $1 million. Well, what he would do is he would start picking apart this economist, and pretty soon you realize the guy was full of it. He wasn't telling the truth. But my dad would never pull the trigger. And it was masterful. And the first time when I saw it, at dinner that night, I'm like, Dad, I don't understand. Why didn't you had him? Did you not know? You had him, and you didn't just bury him. He said, do you think that the jury knew that?
Yeah.
And then the light bulb kicked on. You never want to take the power away from the person making the decision.
Interesting.
Let them make the decision. And now they control the card. So all I am doing is writing workouts to showcase what I already know.
Right.
He's the one that's not convinced.
So is that ingrained in you now as a coach to like, hey, try not to overstep that bound and let him learn it for himself?
You don't have to tell him that's how he's good. He found out himself by the workout you programmed for him.
What's more powerful, right?
100%.
No, so I was in sales for 25 years, and so that's what I did in sales, is that if I was selling to you, you were a commodity manager, a purchasing manager, I let you think that you were actually in charge.
Yeah.
And that's the
You're a step ahead.
because everybody falls into patterns unless you're crazy.
Right.
And it's pretty easy to figure out their behavior, right? Is your touch point quality? Is it on-time delivery? You know, do you need a just-in-time program? Do you want me to put engineers in your facility? Pretty soon you figure out those slots and you solve those things in advance.
Right.
That's all you're doing with an athlete.
Okay.
Is you're trying to get to understand them to what category they need to drop in.
Yeah.
So Fraser was notoriously nervous about the CrossFit Games.
Yeah.
I mean, he's publicly said it, like he would throw up.
Yep.
He was so nervous before going on the floor that he'd throw up in the corner.
Because to him, it was first place or last place. So there was no like, oh, I finished on the podium. It was first place or nothing.
Well, it's going into war.
Right.
And he would really take ownership of that. And part of it is that athletes that don't take ownership, they don't even know what I'm talking about, right? And there was a reason why they never make it to the games, because they don't take the same responsibility.
Right.
Mat Fraser took the ownership piece. And so part of it is that would make, it was stressful for him. It would create this level of anxiety. And what I had to do for Matt was, right before the games, create programming that was so like on the edge where I wasn't confident that he could do it. But if he did it, something that was truly impossible, imagine carrying that momentum into the games.
Yep. The next stage.
And that's what a coach should do. But it's a very difficult thing.
It's excellent.
But because I was at that level of top few in the world, I know what you need. I know that stimulus that we're trying to achieve. And it's a delicate thing. And if you're, I look, there's plenty of coaches that were never athletes that are great coaches.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know how they would be able to do it.
It's a different perspective. And if you had to pick one that is more valuable, I would think as an athlete and as a coach, it has to be, if you had to pick one, Bill Belichick never played in the NFL, all-time great. But if you have someone that was an all-time great as a player, now they're all-time great as a coach, you do want the one that was in, that highly successful competitive environment.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Well,
It's just a deeper relationship.
right. Well, for me, it's like when I have athletes and they're saying, looking at this, I worked with Carl Webb when they had that criterium, and she calls me up they had their athlete briefing. It was 8:00 at night in Madison. And she calls me up and she says, they're doing a criterium. And I don't know how to even do that. I don't know how. Mm-hmm. So Heidi and I went and, went over to where she was staying. And at 9:00 at night, we rode the streets of Madison and teaching her how to ride. And I told her, I said, you're going to have to realize that the key will be the draft and getting behind somebody. And what you need to do is get 1 to 2 inches from that wheel in front. And there is a high risk that you're going to crash, right? And be ready to crash. Well, I've crashed enough on my bike where that doesn't bother me anymore.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
That hasn't. Yeah.
Because I've done it.
Right.
So I'm telling an athlete who could win the CrossFit Games, you need to be prepared to crash.
Okay.
Because it's the reality. And don't be afraid, because it's the sport.
Yeah.
And that's what it takes to win. And I know that. I mean, there was plenty of times on mountain passes where, unfortunately I laid my bike out, 40 miles an hour.
Right.
It happens.
Yeah. Those are some of the most bike crashes you see.
Do you think that CrossFit is unique as a sport, as a coach, to have that perspective? Because it's so generalized, and it's about fitness, and it's about exercise physiology, and it's about a lot of very scientific principles in terms of endurance.
Yeah.
That if you don't have a personal experience with it, maybe you can't truly program, teach, get into the psyche of an athlete as a coach if I don't have that part of it. Maybe that might be unique to CrossFit or not.
Well, it depends on what your motives are. So if you want to stay recreational, then that's fine. What you're always going to do is be in a state of learning. But at some point in time, if you want to become a competitor, you must change your mindset and be strategic. And are you strategic, or are you just along for the ride? For example, if I am, so one of the things Becca White, I did this CrossFit this aerobic capacity course. I was part of CrossFit back then at her gym in LA. And one of the things that I do is I teach this breathing, principles of breathing, and when are you in control, when are you hyperventilating? And the breath is the tell.
Yeah.
And I taught her that. And after the CrossFit Games in 2019, she calls, and this is that right after on that Sunday, she said, I want to have coffee with you tomorrow. She won. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, God. So I would go and meet her and her husband, an amazing couple, incredible. We're sitting there having coffee, and she said, I just want you to know. So I don't swear, but I got to repeat what she said. She goes, in the seminar, she says, when you were teaching that breathing thing, I'm like, yeah. And she says, I thought you were full of shit. And I'm like, what? Now Becca Boyd is one of the nicest people in the sport. Yeah. And my wife and I have valued our relationship with her since we got to know her in 2013.
Awesome.
And I told her that I value the relationship so much that I'll do a seminar at your gym for free. Okay. And you've been inviting all of your members.
Yep.
Like, that's how much I value her. Wow. And I'm like, and my heart just sank. I'm like, ugh. And Justin Berg was there. He walked in, he sits down now next to us. And I'm like, oh, like dagger, just stick it in there. And she says, but I got to tell you, and this is the thing that I'm telling you that about, are you strategic in your thinking? Do you have weapons to call on to win?
Right.
And so she said to me, she says, you're teaching me this cadence thing, and you're teaching me the breathing patterns and all of that stuff. And I find myself in that ruck event, and I'm going around on that the fourth round. And I'm in second place. And what I am doing is I'm neck and neck with the person that is really my main competition to win the CrossFit Games. Right. And then I remember what you said. And she's like, I listen, and I hear, and I knew I won. I knew that's simple. Yeah. That's a weapon. Yeah. And she took off right then, exactly what I said, and she says, you know what? That's why I have won. That's awesome. Yeah, and that's the difference between a recreational athlete who is just working on their running technique, who isn't even ready for breathing mechanics or tactics.
Foot strike, all that, right?
Right. Those things need to be automated.
Yep.
If they're not on autopilot, you're not ready for that next level. Got it. And that's the same thing like I did with Jason Khalipa's. You teach these things in parallel because you don't have a limited time. So while I'm teaching Jason his mechanics, I'm teaching him his pacing, I'm teaching him his breathing, I'm also intentionally bumping him in turns, and I'm jamming him.
Right.
Until the one day when he realized that I was actually messing with him, and then he threatens me. And I never treated him the same again, because now he was a threat to me.
Right.
Because that is an athlete that is now, he's thinking strategically.
Right.
He's a threat. That's a competitor.
That's who you don't want to compete against.
Right. Are you a recreational athlete or are you a competitive athlete? And there's nothing wrong with either one, but a coach needs to know. And too many times coaches will take this recreational athlete who doesn't want to compete. Mm-hmm. Like my height. If you insist on her doing the open, she'd never work out with you again. Because she doesn't want to compete.
Right. Yeah.
But I like that action. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kiss of death. But the coach needs to know.
Okay. That's awesome. Yes. So now your success and failure, right? And failure is in like first place, second place, right? As an athlete, okay? And then you have games athletes that have won the games and then not won the games, okay? The satisfaction and fulfillment that you've gotten from both of those situations as an athlete, but then as a coach, are they completely different from each other? Do you prefer one over the other? Just kind of blending, is it all kind of tied under one umbrella?
I don't care if they win.
Yeah.
I don't. Part of it is that you want, because you know the work that was put in.
Right.
And like Carl Webb, one of the things that I look back on and inside of me, I feel like the job wasn't done. But, she calls me, so she finishes 2 points behind Tia.
Yeah.
And then she calls me that October. She was in Australia, and I remember I was driving to the 40. calls me on the phone and she asked me if I'd be willing to help her. And I knew Cara before that, and Cara, to fast forward, she ends up getting fourth, working with me.
Right.
Well, inside that it hurt me in the sense that I really believed in my heart that Cara could win. Yeah. And the events just didn't fall her way. They didn't. Right. But one of the things that I think back on Cara is like when she called me, she didn't say as her number one goal, because part of it is I want to know what your goals are. And I have no problem as an athlete. Like when Camille, last year, we were working together, before she retired.
Yep.
I asked her, well, what's your goal? And she says, you know what? I want to go top 10. I just want to get into the top 10. If I can get into the top 10, and I respect that. Don't tell me if you want to win, and then you're not going to do what it takes to win. Right. I'm out of there.
Okay.
And so with Cara, I asked her, well, what's your number one? And she says, you know what? I want to break 6 minutes in a mile. And well, what about winning? And she says, oh, that's second. I'm like, well, what's your mile time? She's like, 6:42. I'm like, wow, how's that possible? But 5 months later, she went 5:47. Wow. That's why I was disappointed, because she did everything. The best fitness that she's ever been in her life. And her confidence, her weakness was her running. And here she ran 5:47. That's legit. That's elite.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Talked to her after that, and how did she feel?
We still talk to her. Matter of fact, we're trying to get out to her gym and spend some time with them. No, it really amazing couple.
Does she look back at that and say, it
was best? So part of it is that's where being an athlete, like the world champion in Canada, I was in first place until a mile to go. And I got beat by somebody better than me. Did I underperform? No. I delivered greatness at the highest level that I could. I ran sub 3 hours for my marathon. I mean, it was an amazing event. And I just got beat by somebody better. And that's the number one, is that did you make mistakes? Did you not pay attention to the rules? Did you go off course? Did you get no rep? Those types of things. Those irritate me. But if you're delivering to your fullest potential, and then there's no regret, and that's where she was. Sometimes you just get beat.
I listen to these athletes sometimes. There was no Olsen and Pat Butler, and neither of them had won. And they're always asked, "You're second. How does that feel?" And they struggle to come with an answer that's palatable, that makes them look gracious. But you see, and you see it in the NBA with basketball players who never won a championship. How do athletes come to terms with that? Because like you said, if you gave your very best performance and there were no mistakes, and yet you did not come out on top, how do you reconcile that in your life and move on and say, that was great?
That's what makes CrossFit very difficult, because let's just say at the games, you have 14 events. It's pretty easy to find where your weaknesses are. And did you do the work in that weakness? I mean, and that's the problem, is that CrossFit athletes, and I do it too. I hate sprinting. I'd rather do a 5-mile run. To me, that's much more enjoyable than doing 5 by 100 meters with 3 minutes of rest, right? I'd much rather just go out and run a nice 5 miles. The problem is that those athletes, they're not aware of what they don't know they could fix, because they're athletes. And that's the hard part for me, is that you look at it and it's like, oh man, like Rich Froning. In hindsight, anybody can say when he walked in that 333 in 2014, now in hindsight, anybody could have come in and made him a better runner. But not back then.
Right.
Nobody thought that.
Right.
And yet in 12 weeks, we take them from 6 minutes to 5:41 by doing what? Running 2 times a week and running slow. How did that make him go from 6 minutes to 5:41 by slowing him down?
Right.
I know how to do that. Mm-hmm. Rich, he's got a degree in exercise science, and he used to be the strength and conditioning coach for Tennessee Tech. He won the games 4 times, yet he didn't know. Yeah. But athletes should know.
Right.
Their job is to do the work. Right, and understand the purpose. That's their ownership piece. Mm-hmm. Mine is to figure out the puzzle.
Okay.
And my problem is that when I look at athletes, it's hard for me to be impartial. It's really hard because I'll look at an event and it's like, God, they should fix that.
Yes. I see that on the front of you're like counting the other announcers are making fun of you because you're counting the cadence. You're like, they're breathing. You're talking about their stride.
That was a good one, right?
And I love that. It was great because
That's the only one I've ever gone back and listened to because I'm like, did I call it really in advance?
you did. And when you say relaxed running, and then I hear what you talk about in terms of efficiency and getting your elbow to, sort of auto come back and, be efficient with your motions. Like those are the kind of things that I think you said it sometime. You look at everybody everywhere.
You can't not look
and
at
you
it.
just have to fix people.
Thank God you're not hiding because every time you're going down the street, on the way from the airport here, and it's like, it just burns in my head.
Yeah.
It's like, pull over and let me just give him a little quick advice.
So here's a question from that regard. When the pacing, the idea of pacing, and we could talk about mixed modal work, right? Right now we're in the middle of CrossFit Open. We're actually recording this the weekend of 22.2. And last night we all got to watch Laura Horvath take on 22.2, the deadlift, burpee, ascending, descending ladder. When you watch that workout, I want everyone to know you can watch a workout like that and truly break it down. Deadlift, burpee. You're not just running, swimming, biking. What are your thoughts on athletes when they take on a workout like that, high level like that, versus someone that's trying to get to the high level like that or recreational? Do we overpace? Should there be a plan for everybody? Should be a custom plan?
So I'm going to give you, we went out, Heidi and I went to Australia and we stayed with Tia and Shane back in before she won.
Okay.
And she needed some mental work.
Okay.
She stayed at her house and before that. And one of the things that Tia suffered from was her definition of high intensity wasn't truly the definition of it.
Right.
She thought she was working hard because of her rate of improvement. So let's just say that you were a Webb, you were a 642 miler, and now you're 547.
Right.
Well, I know when you run a 547, there's more there because you didn't just make it under 6, right? You went 547, meaning you made it easy. So at some point in time, you backed off, and I know that.
Okay.
So when I saw Tia, her definition was that she believed I went 547, I PR'd, I'm fast, I'm working hard. No, there's more there.
Okay.
There's more there. And so part of it is that, I know that athletes, when they think that they're working hard, and the ones that are most likely to do this are the elites.
Right.
They believe that they're working hard because look at my numbers, look at where I am, look at where I was.
Right.
And that's not the case.
Okay.
What you need to be able to do, and everything should be measured. You need to be looking at things. And so if you break down that workout, you should be looking at what Laura Horvath was doing, what Justin Medeiros was doing, and what was the average time that they were taking to do an individual burpee, to do an individual deadlift. What was the longest time to do a burpee versus a deadlift? For example, like Laura, the longest amount of time in one of the rounds was 3.7 seconds for a burpee.
Okay.
That was the longest amount of time. Well, if you look at the fastest time, you could see a massive contrast there. You shouldn't have that kind of rate of slowing. We refer to that as a fatigue factor, right? How much are you slowing in these movements? And so but part of it is you need to have the first workout.
Right.
If you don't do it in a warm-up, then you have no data. You have nothing to pull from. You're just guessing. And so now you go back and look at what she did, and you can come up with a sound plan. And that's what she was doing there. She wanted to win, number one, because being, on TV.
Yeah.
And number two is she wanted to see where she would blow up.
Right.
And test it.
Okay.
And so that's what you have to do, is that if you're trying to be the best in the world, you can't make mistakes.
Okay.
Ever.
So you think the mentality there is for an athlete at that level, hey, I'm doing this workout twice, experiment first time, learn from a mistake and do it again. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Or if you're not, then what you need to do is you need to practice it. So in that workout, it's a 10-minute workout.
Yep.
That means that you have to pace it. Anything over 3 minutes, you have to pace because you don't have enough energy to just go out hot and think you're going to finish.
Right.
So that's number one. You have to have a pacing-based strategy. All right, so now that's the case. Well, how are you pacing it?
Right.
What's your speed? You have to have a benchmark.
Right.
And then it has to be measurable when you get to that checkpoint to know whether or not you're too fast or too slow.
Right.
It's kind of like if we were doing laps around the track, and let's just say that I wanted you to do, 1 lap around the track in 2 minutes. Well, I want you to check your split at 100 meters. And if you're at 100 meters in 26 seconds, you're too fast. Yeah. You need to slow down by the time you get to 200.
Right. That was a big part of 22.1, that 15-minute kind of grind workout where we really drew out paces for a lot of people. And it's like, hey, if you do your first round in this, you're going to have to slow down because you can't sustain anything close to it.
But that's a hard concept for CrossFit athletes because
It is.
it is.
Yeah.
Because it's ingrained, especially like I came in through the era of 2008 where it was like high intensity was like when you blew up in a workout.
Right.
And that concept never made sense to me of like, wait, you're telling me I'm doing high intensity, yet I am literally got my hand on my knees sucking down air. I'm not even moving it. You're telling me that I'm doing high intensity.
It was just heart rate dependent. If my heart rate's high, I'm doing high intensity.
That's the problem though, is
Right.
that CrossFit athletes blow right through their lactate threshold.
Yep.
And then they blow up, and then what do? They free fall back down, and then they recover, and then they blow through it again instead of all the way. And that is how you get your best time.
Yes.
There's not an endurance athlete in the world that does workouts like CrossFit athletes.
Right.
Ever.
Ever? Yeah.
Yes. Could you imagine? It's like you're going to do the 5K. I've talked about this, like my favorite event I'd love to do back in the day would be a 5K in the Olympics because, they don't break for commercial. I do a lot of deep time. Could you imagine I go out hot, when I'm 100 meters ahead, 8 laps into that 12 and a half laps and, the announcers are like, Libby Hinshaw, you got this thing bagged. The next thing you know, I stop and then run. And it's like, would they applaud that?
Yeah. Right.
What really surprised me is that CrossFit has not adopted more of your philosophies in terms of programming, because when you talk about, I've been CrossFitting for a while. When I started listening to you, I said, wow, this is so obvious and clear about how to make yourself better, but why are we not doing this? Where you say, if you rest a lot, you'll get better at rest, and how you train Mat Fraser with the D balls, and how he couldn't only do 12 of the really super heavy ones. And then you had him do them, but then you also in his rest do lighter wall ball in order to train his recovery period. And I was like, why are we not doing that in more workouts? Because every workout we do, we sit there and we're just like spent and we stand there. And why are we not? And I feel like in another 3 or 4 years, that principle is going to be universal. Like all workouts will be programmed with some sort of recovery mode type of adaptation response.
For sure. Because what we're trying to do is we have an athlete coming into the gym, we're trying to get them to do more work in the same amount of time. So why would you do a Metcon where you get this buildup of blood lactate all the way to the peak of the peak of the peak, and then they finish their Metcon, and then what do? We let them lay on the ground. Why not do the mirror image of the bell-shaped curve and work the recovery side? Now we're getting more value. The thing is like CrossFit is, and we talked about like Jason Khalipa and this concept of pacing. I was heavily criticized by CrossFit back then. I mean, highly criticized. But in 2016, Nicole Perro calls me and wants to partner. So you've got to realize that CrossFit, it's a conservative organization, and they're not going to just drink anybody's Kool-Aid. Prove it that what you're doing is creating value for our community. And now we look at pacing, which I was highly criticized, and it's the whole sport.
It's the foundation.
Right, it changed the sport. And that's one of the things that is hard for me, is that I have these concepts that the elites do, but they're just not trickling down yet. They're just because it's not ready. And like one of the things that I am the most proud of is interval style workouts. And we're seeing it now in the open. And the truth is that we do intervals, because we can create a higher level of intensity for a longer amount of time because we're giving them rest.
Right.
Obviously. But back then it wasn't. And so I think that in fairness to CrossFit, they are aware. You know, Glassman was always kind to me, always. And the only time he wasn't kind was whenever we would get together, he'd never let me leave. He wanted to talk and talk and talk about, like, he loved what I was sharing.
Yeah.
And he wanted to hear more.
Okay. Talk shop. Yeah.
That was Glassman. He was really interested in give me the evidence, not only from the scientific community, but what is your evidence?
Yeah.
And where?
A lot of data.
And where are you going? Like when Camille won the games in 2014, I started working with her 13 months prior to that. And it was a huge highlight for me. I happened to walk past, Heidi and I walked past the CrossFit booth in LA, and Glassman was out front. And he puts his arm around. I've known him since 2000. Heidi's with me, and we get sucked into the booth. I missed the whole award ceremony because he wants to talk about what we're doing. So there's the founder of the sport and into it, loved it. And that's why I think that it changes. It just takes time. And that's where, you look at what Mat Fraser and doing those types of workouts. Think about that was in 2016. He's been doing those things. 2016. That's why athletes, when we were talking about Vellner and Noah Olson, and I helped Vellner last year going into the games, and I helped Noah too. But part of it is that if I haven't worked with an athlete, they just don't know.
Right.
They have no idea what they're missing out on, and that's the shame because their career will end, and they could have been better.
Are you working with CrossFit now to do more data-driven projects? Because I know you're such a data guy. You have a lot of data. You've done work with so many different athletes. You talked about doing different programming for large numbers of athletes.
Yeah.
And is that something that you're interested in to sort of demonstrate how these principles can work in actuality?
Yeah, so I'm a numbers guy, and nothing turns me on other than hiding more than a spreadsheet. I love a good spreadsheet, and if we can open tabs and I can have multiple displays, that's so very.
What a compliment.
That's the best. Part of the problem is that people don't know what to do with the data. What do you do with it? Like, for example, it's interesting, like we were just talking about Roger Bannister breaking 4 minutes per mile in 1953, and what was the wearable technology that he had back then? He had a stopwatch. That's it. And yet he broke 4 minutes, and the mile's, 3:43 now? And look at all of what we have available to us. The problem is like this Garmin watch is an incredible product in what it can provide me. But what does the average consumer do? Like if you download and you could look at your strike frequency, what does that even mean to you? For example, your ground contact. If your 52% of your time is on your left foot and 48 is on your right foot, what does that even mean? It's collecting it and it's telling me, but what is the actionable plan? The heart rate information. Should I follow heart rate? What should I do? They don't even know. And so part of the problem is that Google, Apple, Microsoft, they're all collecting this data, mountains of it, but there's no actionable task coming out of it. What do you do with it? And that's the problem, is that you have to, if you collect it, you have to have something that you're trying to gather. So I'll give you an example that I just did an echo bike progression. I do a lot of white labeling of workouts, and the deal we have since with the relationship, they publicized that I ride in Florida. Great. Well, I just did I did an echo bike progression. It was 2 workouts a week, and what we did is we started with a 5-minute max effort for cows, and then it ended 10 weeks later, I think, with 100 cows for men and 80 cows for women.
Okay.
I had over 2,000 people doing this, and what I did was I took the initial result of 5 minutes, and I started creating personalization for every single person every week, every workout, I personalized it for free. Yeah. There was no extra cost. They got it all for free because that's how you maximize the adaptation is through personalization.
Right.
And the only way to personalize is to manipulate the workouts. This is important. You write the workout to get the data you want. So part of it is that, we've talked about fatigue factor. Well, I have one data point at 5 minutes. What I'm trying to find out is each individual athlete, the rate of fatigue as they progress into different time domains. So you can't maintain your speed for 5 minutes that you would for 1 minute, right? You slow down. Well, that rate of fatigue tells me a lot about your physiology, your strengths and weaknesses. Yes. So what do I have to do? I have to do another test somewhere in the middle, like a 1 minute effort. Now I can compare your speed, right? Your wattage at 1 minute and your average wattage at 5 minutes. And now I have a fatigue factor there. But what do I really want? I don't want just a linear line. I want a curve. Yeah. So what do I have to do? I have to do another test. So I do a peak power test. I do, 10 seconds, a max effort I can get. Right. And so what you're doing is that you are driving the workouts towards a better understanding of the population that you're serving. Because CrossFit athletes, they're not specialists. And so what we want to do is better understand the recreational athlete and their rate of fatigue. So like, for example, in the movement of running, you slow down between 400 meters and a mile. And what I'm talking about is the slope, right? So you slow down roughly 21 to 22%. So from 400 meters to 800, 21 to 22, 800 to a mile, you slow down 21 to 22%. Runners slow down somewhere around 10, 11, 12%. Okay. Well, if you are looking at the running community and what they publish, you'd be sitting there going, wait, Rich Froning, I'm at 28% right now. Am I going to get all the way down to 12? That means I got to run a 4:45 mile. That's never going to happen to a guy that's going to run 2 times a week at most. Right. So that's where part is understanding who your audience is, but then writing workouts in a way where when you collect the data, you already know what you're looking for, so it's usable. So when people ask me, do you have evidence of what you're doing? I have evidence of every single thing I'm doing because all my workouts are written for proving my principles.
Interesting. Do you have to, now that you have outlined so much of this in your head at least, and you've demonstrated it to your satisfaction, is it about getting it to the masses? Because that's what part of this is, right? You're coaching coaches to coach athletes, but from a recreational all the way up to a competitive level. Because when I listen to you talk about running, you start with the basics. You say you have to video yourself, you have to look at your footwork, you have to prevent injury, and these are all the basics. But then you're also talking about way more complex physiologic performance issues, in addition to, like you said, with Khalipa, you talk about mechanics, you also bring in all the other things as well, recovery. So you're sort of paralleling CrossFit in the sense like they have an L1 and an L2, and now there's going to be a Hinshaw at L1 and a Hinshaw L2, and then they're going to have these people out there who are going to help all athletes, just like CrossFit does, in terms of endurance, in terms of learning how to run properly. Like I will tell you, I hated running. But when I started listening to you, and especially with Mark Bell, because you were encouraging, and he's a power lifter, and he's not a runner. It's like, wow, Mark Bell, if you could get him encouraged about this, that sounds like something that I could do maybe. Yeah. And so it's that sort of approach that you have, where you have the knowledge, the sort of compassion, a way to not lower it, but to make it digestible, and then also teaching coaches that approach so that they can bring it out to everybody. Is that your ultimate goal in terms of like in 10 years, like what you plan to do?
I don't have that kind of a plan. So part of it is I've taken what Matt said. Matt Chan told me early on was, if you're going to do it, share everything, and I do. The only thing I don't share is athlete results. It's not my. It's not something that I talk about, and that way I never have. I don't share that information. But if I know something, if I've learned something that works, I share it. I share it with the community, and it makes me want to go out and learn more, to continue to push the edge of the envelope. But
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, your next step, like, you have shared so much. Does that challenge you to say, hey, what's next on my plate to share with the community?
But what did I say before we rolled the cameras? I mean, what I have going on right now is so incredibly, it's so beautiful.
It is.
I sometimes when I finish the day and I'll go grab Heidi and I go, I know, just, can you just like, and I know you don't want to just look at the spreadsheet, but I just got to show you. It's so beautiful. Like the flow and how, like, that where I am. And that's why, I'm more excited now in what I'm doing than I've ever been.
That's awesome.
By far what I am doing. And part is that I understand our market. I know our consumer, and it's a real sport. I mean, you know, it used to be a joke where it's like, oh, CrossFit's something that other athletes do, you know, as supplemental training. You know, there's no difference of doing CrossFit and rolling out or doing a stretching routine. And what now we are realizing is one of the largest sports in the world is training. In the world. Well, what we also must realize is that those are never going to be the Olympians. These are the athletes that sit in the middle. They weren't genetically born like I was with a predisposition, you know, with that, you know, lung capacity that's 50% larger, a VO2 max that's in the mid 80s, you know, or slow twitch fibers that's 85%. I mean, I was genetically born that way. You are never going to be able to do those things because of genetics. But you know what? CrossFit's proving, training is proving that you can dip close to the endurance end of the equation, and you can dip close to the strength end of the equation, mutually ends of the spectrum, and you could take a bigger slot where mine is just super narrow and defined. What I believe and what I'm excited about is that person, that marketplace, I want to be the best in the world at targeting them. How can I drive adaptation more efficiently to that consumer? Firefighters, I was just here last week. I do a lot of work with the FDNY, and it's a tough space because of tradition, bureaucracy, but they all know that the number one cause of death as a firefighter is cardiorespiratory disease. So what do they do about it? High intensity interval training, because you know what? We could do Tabata, 8 rounds of 20-10 and we're done. And then I could do some heavy bench press.
Time efficient, yeah.
Right, but the problem is that they are also a recreational athlete, but their job requires them to do incredibly demanding aerobic work.
Yeah.
But they don't have an aerobic development.
Right.
They think doing 8 rounds of 20-10 is going to do the trick. And unfortunately, it is not.
Okay.
And so what you have to do is you have to think of those things as a puzzle. Like you look at it like an athlete, any athlete. It's like, okay, so what do you do with a firefighter? How do you help them? So we do our programming for firefighters, military, we do it all for free. Everything's free for them for what they do for us. Even with that, that's a step, but that doesn't mean that you're going to penetrate that marketplace, to help them.
Right.
You have to come up with something that they buy into. And so I just did 5 seminars with Matt Shannon in North Metro for the firefighter community. And it's like, how do I do something that resonates? And they wear a cylinder, for air, and that air cylinder, when they fight a live fire, it lasts on average 20 minutes. In every single one of those 5 seminars, I had a variety of chiefs that were sitting in there. And everybody's waiting for the chiefs to give a signal like, this guy's okay. Right? But I'm an outsider, I'm not a firefighter.
Right.
And so I started talking about the cylinder. And I said, what if I can improve the aerobic capacity, the efficiency? Because one of the major measures of aerobic fitness is how fast can you clear fatigue. And I know that through these fundamental principles, I can improve your ability to utilize air more efficiently. In other words, that instead of that day taking 20 minutes, I can make it last 22.
Okay.
Well, if you have 10 people in your firehouse, you all improve by 10%. I just hired a new firefighter for no money.
Interesting.
That appealed.
Okay, business. Yeah.
You have to solve the puzzle.
That's called being ahead of the curve again. You know, just it goes beyond the surface level of, hey, these guys will be in better shape. You're thinking a step ahead.
But you need buy-in, and that's the problem historically, like with the military, is that they historically have done things the same way because that's the way we've always done it since Vietnam. I can't tell you how many times we hear, yeah, you know, my guy, he's just, you know, our commanding officer, just, you know, we got to just do a Vietnam Day here.
Or school. Yeah.
Right, and it's like, do you not even realize, like, you're going to give me a 90-pound rock and do a sprint across an intersection? I'm not your guy for that.
Yeah.
But if you need me to go in 20 miles with a 50-pound rock, do something, and then 20 miles back, I'm your guy.
Like that.
Right. Treat them all the same. And so part of it is that you want to, like, some way, somehow create something that resonates, but you still have someone making decisions, and they have to be reasonable. You know, this gentleman Turner, when I was at Camp Pendleton, he came out to the track, and we had an incredible conversation. And one of the things that I asked him, Marines had to do a 3-mile run. And he told me, he says, fitness is my number 3 priority. And the first thing I asked him was, well, why is that? And he said to me, he says, well, because, you know, we all, and this was at the award ceremony for Marine of the Year, he says, we've all been in combat. We've all made really tough decisions. And the one thing that we will all agree on is that if we make that life and death decision under less fatigue, we save lives, which is obvious, right? But it's nice that a commanding general, a major general says this. Right? Well, so when I thought, man, here's my chance. Like, let's find out if this guy's reasonable. So I turned around and I asked him, I said, so your 3-mile run, your BFT, your physical fitness test. Yep. I said, what would be your dream for every Marine? Just to see. Because, you know, I'm thinking he's going to say, you know, 18 minutes, you know, 100-point score or something like that. Mm-hmm. Without a hesitation, it says 24 minutes. Now, I don't care who you are. If I have you captive for 4 years, I can make anybody run 3 miles in 24 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's what you need. You need somebody that's being reasonable. Reasonable. Because what will happen is what's happening in New York. You know, the original standard is that firefighters should be able to run a 1.5 miles in 10.5 minutes. But yet they're passing the academy at 14.5 minutes.
Yeah, so they're not, they don't correlate with each other yet.
That's a problem.
Yeah, it is a major problem.
How much of this job is, it sounds like as much of your job is knowledge, it's also an overwhelming amount of psychology and trying to get, like you said, buy-in is coachability. You're trying to get these people to be coachable. And it's so hard, especially when you're up against established systems. And if they weren't the Army, armed forces, if they weren't people that we rely on, respect, care about, it would be something to be almost so disheartening to work with this.
It kind of is, but part is like, so I'm a math guy, and you think of it as an equation. There's an answer there. Somewhere there's an answer. You just have to figure it out. Like, that's why I love spreadsheets, is because you're sitting there and it's like, how can I write some code that can take this fatigue factor with these other results, grab all of them, and then populate all these time domains? And not only time domains, but distances, and do it for any person. There's an answer there, and it's doable. And it's the same thing with the relationship. The problem is sometimes they're just not ready. And that's where you have to be patient. And that's where CrossFit, sometimes people just aren't ready, which there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that we're not a fit.
Right.
I mean, I've had athletes, you know, that I look at them and it's like, I shake my head, and they should win the CrossFit Games.
Okay.
And they're near the end of the career. Next thing you know, the call comes in. And it's always the same thing. I don't know what to fix and how to fix. And they're lost. Because you know what? Eventually, that youthful vigor, where they're on top of the world, the arrogance, you know, they think that they know everything, and you can't communicate with them. You should just walk away. And I walk away all the time from elite athletes because
I was going to ask.
They're not willing to listen. And if they don't listen, how do you explain the purpose of a workout? Like, Chris, your paces were too slow. You told me in the recovery to run 8 minutes, but I ran 7. You know what? I'm out of here. I'm out because you're not paying attention to me. I'm making you do 8 minutes because you need to be able to run an 8-minute mile pace if you get a workout that requires 8-minute mile pace. And yet you now created no muscle memory. Rich Froning, Mat Fraser, all of those champions, they have at minimum 13 speeds they train. 13. Like Fraser, we talked about it. He can't walk, unfortunately, at a 16-minute mile pace. He can't. He'll never be an Army Ranger.
Are men or women more coachable or the same? Just the individual, it just depends on the person.
Women aren't, for sure. Because I think the boys, can I tell the story about Jason Hopper and going swimming with him?
Oh, yeah. It's a good one.
So Jason Hopper, I worked with him, and he's a football player, big kid out of Clemson, and Southern boy, and a nice guy. Came, stayed with us for a while last year, and he when he wins that and he makes wins Knoxville and he makes it to the games, and he starts talking to me, and Matt O'Keefe put me in contact with him, and I said, oh yeah, I'd like to help him. And he was just a nice, good kid. And he levels with me. He's all, I've never swam before. I mean, I'm very athletic, but I'm not I know how to swim, but I'm not a swimmer. How good do you think I can get by the time I get to the games? So first of all, don't ask the question. You don't want to know the answer. No, I want to know. And I'm like, you're not going to do well. You're not. Or you just don't have enough time. And he's all, bro. I mean, he was super bummed by it. That's why it was called bro, because it was the first thing, bro. He wanted to know. So he comes and stays with us, and we go to this, amazing place, where beautiful lake, and where we go, this guy lays out buoys every 50 meters along the shore, and it's incredible. And then he goes out on a pedal type of boat, and he can be side by and video and all that. It's just amazing what happens there. Awesome. So we're going to go in and we're going to work on paddle boarding, and different types of things. But one of the other ones, we're going to swim. Well, the buoys were laid out where it was 650 meters to the end. So he's got his suit on, and I'm going to hold on, and you have to go down this ramp, down to that dock. So from the house out to the water was probably maybe 40 meters. Well, he's got his suit on. I'm like, hold on. So he's down at the ramp, on the dock. And I go and I just take off my sweatpants, and I get my suit on. And I go down the ramp, and he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you have your suit on. I'm like, I know, Jay, I got my suit on. And he's like, yeah, but are you going to swim? He had no idea. No idea. And I'm like, yeah, I was thinking I'd just go join you out there. He's like, dude, bro, it's 650 meters down there. I'm almost 1,300 round trip, right? And he's like, I bet, no. And I'm like, so I'm about to just get in the water. And he's like, okay. He had no idea. And then when I dove in the water, someone, just how they die. And he's like, and he wasn't even surprised by that. He's like, bro, how'd you dive in with the goggles on? And full off. He was mystified at that move. Yeah. So I told him, I'm like, dude, you got to get some fins, and we're going to swim. You use fins. Yeah. He's like, yeah.
That's hilarious. It's a great story.
That's where they just don't know. They don't know.
Yeah.
And that's what the problem is. The boys is that there's that arrogant confidence that they don't, and that's when I look at a Mat Fraser who was confident but never arrogant, would always listen. He was a neighbor of ours for 3 years, and he'd come over and we would just talk, and that's what you need,
right?
Because none of those, they're never going to know what I know,
right?
And that's why I don't go into all these other types of interesting gymnastics. When I started, doing, those 5-minute types of workouts, I partnered with Chad Vaughn, an Olympian weightlifter, and Dave Durante, Olympian gymnast. I don't want to learn those things. My space is enough.
Right.
And I want to be the best I can in my space.
Okay.
And that's why I don't want to be like a dedicated CrossFit coach. I want, if you are an elite athlete, you need to have a coach that's coordinating it. So we're going to CrossFit Fort Vancouver, meeting up, with the Alan and all of that.
Yep.
I would not work with a Justin Medeiros one-on-one anymore. The sport has gotten too complicated.
Okay.
You need to have somebody that is looking after your well-being and managing the house of cards.
Got it.
And so you feed it, but it also goes into that coach. Like my relationship with Katrín, Ben saw everything.
Right.
And I don't have a problem with you seeing what I'm doing. I don't have a problem at all, but I need your help to make this happen.
Yep.
Because I'm going to micromanage.
We can work together. Yeah.
Right. And that's where I'm not territorial at all. But women by far are more cooperative.
Okay.
They're more willing to listen.
Okay.
I think that men, it may be where I can be that.
Got it.
And that they're not willing to listen.
Put the guard down. Let the ego. Check the ego at the door.
Right.
Athletes are most coachable athletes are women always in our gym.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I've been coaching 10 years and women are easier. No offense, guys.
But it's the shame is like you wish that, and the men will always calm down
Yeah.
when their career is on the back end.
Right.
And now panic comes in
Yep.
because they're like, wow, I'm not what I used to be. My body's breaking down. I don't recover as fast as I used to.
Yep.
They don't have solutions.
Vulnerable.
Right. So I started working with Noah Olson. He called me and he wanted to work and works with Training Think Tank, and I've been working with Max and sent it on to them. I said, you know what? Here's the deal, and this is what you need to do. And I was crystal clear. I slowed it down. Well, he turns around and he runs a 509 mile. After working together several months, and all I'm doing is having him run slow. He can't wrap his head around it, but to me it was an obvious thing. And so that's where, as a specialist, I'm very confident in what I do.
Hey, and this has been probably one of my favorite hours in CrossFit since I started.
Ever.
Yeah, it really is. So I want to thank you so much just for the time. I can't wait for the seminar tomorrow. I know I'm probably be the luckiest person there tomorrow because I got the appetizer, the great deal. So thank you again, Chris Hinshaw of Aerobic Capacity, guys. Take it from us. He's just a godfather in the sport from the endurance side, and anyone and everyone can take something from it, whether you're high end, low end, new to CrossFit, old to CrossFit. But like you said, put the ego down and try to learn as much as you can. All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for taking the time out of your day to listen to the HERDFIT podcast. Be on the lookout for next week's episode.